One park, 1,000 stories. Banff Centre Radio, 101.1 FM. Community radio from the Bow Valley. Banff Centre Radio.
For many Banffites, bird watching is one of the great pleasures of living in this park. After all, more than 300 species have been known to visit Banff. But the number of birds that visit this park might be changing drastically. According to a new report from the U.S.-based National Audubon Society, nearly half of all bird species in North America are severely threatened by climate change. To tell us about that report and how it might impact the Bow Valley, I'm joined on the phone by Nature Canada's Paul Jorgensen. He helped compile data for the report. Hello.
Hi, Meg.
So tell me, Paul, these stats sound pretty dire, potentially half of all bird species being threatened by climate change. What exactly is happening?
Well, there's a few different things that are happening. One is species are seeing just their habitable range just outright decline. So, it's contracting. It used to be X number of square kilometers, and now it's going to be less than that. But another thing that's happening, which, kind of most people hadn't really done any research on, but it could be just as bad, is we're seeing habitat shifts as well. So even if you had a species that's population or that habitat didn't really decrease too much, but it shifted to a new place, that's still a big problem for that species. If the new habitable range is right in the middle of, say, a big urban area or in, say the Great Northern Boreal Forest, and that species doesn't live well in, boreal forests, that can still potentially wipe out those species.
How long do we have?
Well, it's hard to say. The Audubon study looked at a range from the year 2000 to the year 2080. So it's an 80-year time frame that we're looking at. And the most dire, the worst results are all, without exception, experienced at year 80. So that's as far as the study was able to take the existing data.
Looking specifically at the Western Canadian Rockies, what birds are threatened here?
Well, there's a whole bunch. And one thing that's important to draw a distinction at is that this study looked at the decline in habitable range. So it didn't necessarily look at the populations itself. But, I mean, if a population or if a bird species loses 98% of its habitable range, you can be pretty sure that it's not going to be doing very well, and that's a pretty good candidate for extinction. But I mean, to give it, some examples in the Banff area, you've got the American three-toed woodpecker. It's going to be experiencing a 73% decline in its summer habitable range and a 44% decrease in its winter habitable range, and that's going to utterly disappear from the Banff area. It's a really fantastic species that you're just not going to see or hear anymore. Another one in the Banff area is the mountain chickadee. It's going to see 2/3 of its summer range just simply go away, and a roughly similar percentage of its winter range as well.
Are there any other iconic species elsewhere in Canada that we might lose?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you want to talk about possibly the single most iconic species, the loon, it's on our money. The loon, according to the data there, is looking like it's going to completely disappear from Ontario's cottage country, So, I mean, when we think about this, when you think about getting kids out in nature and getting people out in nature, this is what nature sounds like. Really birds contribute in a large part to the sounds of nature. And we're going to have to realize that nature's not going to sound the same way to our kids and our grandkids anymore.
Imagine already they're just learning what vinyl is again, right? To look at a loonie and say, what is that bird?
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any birds that could be positively affected by climate change?
Yeah, there are some that are going to see their range expand. They're in the very vast minority, but one that's endemic to kind of your parts of the world, Alberta area, is the tree swallow. It's going to see about a little over a 1/3 increase in the summer, and it's actually going to see a really big increase in the winter, about a 92% increase in its habitable range in the winter. But those are the exception to the rule. Those are not the rule. The vast bulk of the species studied are all looking at declines.
Looking at climate change in general, it's causing so much environmental changes. We're looking at melting glaciers, rising oceans, extreme weather. There is so much going on. Why should we care about the change in the bird population?
Well, there's a few reasons. One is, as I said, just even for our own selfish reasons, even if you don't care, birds are a big part of what nature sounds mean to us. And I think there's something essential and something important that we'll all lose when that happens. But, from a more hard science ecological perspective, an important thing to realize is that scientists across the world use birds and bird statistics and bird population data to track the overall health of ecosystems. Birds are a fantastic indicator of ecosystem health and biodiversity. And so this is the first study of its kind, and it's really suggesting that, even species that we weren't thinking were going to be hit hard are going to get hit hard.
And I understand it wasn't just scientists, it was also birders that played a huge role in gathering the data for this report. How did that work?
So Nature Canada, we're actually the oldest national nature conservation charity in Canada, and we have over 350 field naturalist clubs in every single kind of little community from coast to coast to coast in Canada. And in some instances, these clubs have been collecting data for over 100 years. And very meticulous data. These are people who give their weekends, give time. They care passionately about this, and they collect data. For instance, with the Christmas bird count, they collect other data as well. For instance, monarch butterflies and things like that. And so this is Canada-wide, and these data were shared with the American Audubon Society, and that's why the report, if you look at it, it's got Canadian data. It's because of our field naturalist clubs, in large part, that provided the kind of base layer of Audubon's data.
You mentioned data over 100 years. What are some of the oldest groups that have been participating in this?
So the absolute oldest field naturalist club in Canada is actually right in the city that I'm based in Ottawa. So it's the Ottawa Field Naturalists. They're actually so old, they're older than Canada. They're over 150 years old. So they've got records that date back to the 19th century. It's absolutely unreal.
Is there something about the birding population? If you think of all the activities that people could do you think that lends them to doing a great job when it comes to scientific research?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, birders and field naturalists kind of writ large, they're known for their meticulousness. They're known for meticulous looking at data. I mean, probably the most famous, field naturalist in history was Charles Darwin, and his big thing was he loved beetles, and he collected. I don't know what the number is, but I think it's something like 10,000 different kinds of beetles, and he studied them in just minute detail. So yeah, there's something about these amazing people that really makes them just absolutely fantastic citizen scientists.
So we've got the scientists, the citizen scientists, the spaces, the birds. I wanted to ask, what role do you think protected areas like Banff National Park play in helping save bird species?
Absolutely crucial. It's almost hard to overstate how important things, protected spaces like Banff National Park, is to this sort of equation. So for 65 years, Nature Canada has been advocating for more parks and protected spaces. We count about 63 million acres of parks and protected spaces that we've helped campaign for and that have been established. And in Canada especially, since we're seeing, just to take the example of birds, since that's the subject du jour, we're going to be seeing a lot of these birds coming into Canada as sort of climate refugees. And so more than ever, we're going to need these protected spaces to serve if these species are going to have any chance at a life once they're displaced from their existing habitat. So yeah, absolutely. Alberta is absolutely rich in spaces that are hugely important for birds and also biodiversity across the board.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Meg.
That's Paul Jorgensen. He's a senior communications manager at Nature Canada. We reached him in Ottawa.